a freezing January morning in 1957, a Chicago construction worker driving down this desolate, snow-covered road spotted what he thought were two mannequins tossed casually behind a guardrail.
But unfortunately, they definitely weren't mannequins.
No, they weren't. They were the bodies of two missing teenage sisters. And the police's absolute desperation to explain how they got there would end up exposing a legal system that basically allowed the mental torture of innocent people, all while letting actual killers walk free on technicalities.
Which is exactly why today we're wading deep into one of Chicago's most haunting unsolved mysteries, the 1956 disappearance and murder of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. To understand the scale of it, we have to look at the night of December 28th, 1956. Brighton Park, a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago.
Setting the scene.
Yeah. So 15-year-old Barbara Grimes and her 12-year-old sister, Patricia, leave home at around 7:30 p.m. They have exactly $2.50 between them.
Just a couple of kids going out for the evening.
Exactly. They are walking to the local Brighton theater to see Elvis Presley's movie, Love Me Tender.
And I think the sources emphasize they weren't just casually catching a movie, right? This was their 11th time watching it.
11th time. They were hardcore fans who had just scraped together the money to join the official Elvis fan club.
Wow. And a school friend actually sat behind them in the theater that night and noted they were in great spirits.
Right. They even bought popcorn between the double feature, which meant they were definitely staying for the second showing.
So they weren't planning on running away or anything.
Not at all. Their mother, Loretta, expected them home by 11:45 p.m. at the absolute latest.
But midnight comes and goes.
Yeah. Loretta sends their older siblings to wait at the nearest bus stop. 3 consecutive buses roll by, and the girls aren't on any of them.
That sinking feeling must have been terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. By 2:15 in the morning, a terrified Loretta calls the Chicago Police Department. And what triggers next is one of the largest, most frantic missing persons searches in the history of Cook County.
The numbers from the sources are just staggering. The city essentially deputized hundreds of police officers to do nothing but search full-time.
They dredged the freezing canals. They distributed over 15,000 flyers.
And they questioned 300,000 people. 300,000.
It's an astronomical number.
I mean, that is a mathematical absurdity.
Yeah.
You cannot effectively interview that many people. That isn't an investigation. That's a dragnet thrown over an entire metropolis out of pure panic.
And the panic was entirely fueled by a media frenzy that just spiraled out of control. Because the girls were so tied to the Elvis phenomenon, sightings were reported everywhere.
People see what they want to see.
Exactly. People claim they saw them at a Kresge's Five and Dime store listening to records. Others swore they hitched a ride to Nashville to meet Elvis in person.
Didn't an advice columnist get involved too?
Yeah, the syndicated advice columnist Ann Landers actually printed an anonymous letter from a girl who claimed she saw a man force the sisters into a dark-colored Mercury.
Oh, right.
She even gave a partial license plate 2184, but that lead just evaporated into nothing.
Yeah, and the FBI eventually had to step in, right, just to handle the sheer volume of hoax ransom notes Loretta was receiving.
Yes, the cruelty of people sending fake ransom notes to a grieving mother is just beyond words.
It really is. And I think to put this in perspective for you listening, think about the cultural magnitude of this. It's literally like if Taylor Swift went on national television today to personally beg 2 missing Swifties to come home.
That is a perfect analogy.
That is the level of absolute cultural saturation this case reached. Because Elvis Presley himself actually issued a public statement.
He did.
He went on TV and radio, directly addressing Barbara and Patricia, telling them that if they were good Presley fans, they would go home and ease their mother's worries.
And the psychological weight of that moment on the Chicago Police Department cannot be overstated. They weren't just working a local missing persons case anymore.
No, the whole country was watching.
They had the eyes of the entire country and the biggest celebrity on the planet demanding results. They were tasked with calming a nation.
But all of those 300,000 interviews, all of that national attention, it didn't save Barbara and Patricia.
No, it didn't.
Because almost a month later, on January 22nd, 1957, there's a rapid thaw in the Chicago snow. A construction worker named Leonard Prescott is driving along German Church Road, a rural, unincorporated area.
And that's when he spots something behind a guardrail.
Right. He assumes it's discarded mannequins,
Yeah.
and then realizes the horrifying truth. It's the nude, frozen bodies of the sisters.
And this discovery instantly creates a massive, almost insurmountable forensic problem for the police. Well, the official autopsy results released to the public were just baffling. The pathologist concluded there were no obvious fatal wounds, no gunshot, no strangulation.
Okay.
So they ruled the official cause of death as secondary shock due to exposure to the cold temperatures.
See, I need us to pause here and actually define secondary shock, because it sounds like medical jargon designed to hide something.
It basically
Right,
is.
secondary shock is essentially a catch-all term for the body's systems shutting down.
Ugh,
It happens to literally everyone who dies. It's not a root cause of death, it's just the physical process of dying.
exactly.
The coroner was essentially using a vague physiological symptom to avoid putting the word homicide on the death certificates.
That's entirely what they were doing. They claimed the girls just died of exposure within 5 hours of leaving the theater and blamed any damage on the bodies to post-mortem animal predation.
Wow. But that vagueness didn't sit well with everyone on the inside, did it?
No, not at all. Harry Gloss, the chief investigator for the coroner's office, fiercely and publicly disputed these findings.
Good for him.
Yeah, he pointed to a very specific, undeniable physical anomaly at the crime scene. There was a thin, distinct layer of ice encrusted directly on the girls' bodies.
And the thermodynamics of that ice layer completely shatter the official timeline.
Let's break that down.
Yeah, so for that specific shell of ice to form, the bodies had to be warm when they were dumped into the snow. The heat from the bodies melts the surrounding snow, which then refreezes into an icy crust.
Right.
But the weather records show there hadn't been a snowfall significant enough to create that reaction until January 7th.
So Gloss was arguing, with simple science, that the girls didn't die on December 28th. They were kept alive, held captive somewhere, for over a week.
Which is a terrifying thought.
It is, and Gloss went even further. He went to the press and claimed there were clear marks of violence on the girls' faces and undeniable evidence of sexual assault.
Oh, wow.
He accused the police and his own coroner's office of deliberately sanitizing the autopsy reports out of respect for the girls and to spare their mother the brutal reality of what happened.
That is wild.
And for speaking out and refusing to retract his statements, Gloss was fired from the coroner's office.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me medical professionals willingly falsified an autopsy of 2 murdered children just so the neighbors wouldn't gossip?
That's exactly what happened.
How was that not a massive criminal conspiracy in itself? They were literally destroying the evidentiary foundation of a double homicide to protect the victims' reputations.
I know it sounds unfathomable today, but it really highlights a profound systemic flaw in 1950s Chicago. The social norms of the era heavily prioritized outward respectability.
Image was everything.
Exactly. There was a deep societal fear of scandal, particularly involving young women. The authorities genuinely believed they were doing the family a favor by insisting these were just nice, chaste girls who tragically got lost and froze to death.
Rather than admitting they were victims of a brutal sexual predator.
Right. But by protecting the postmortem image of the victims, they fatally compromised the investigation. You cannot profile, track, or catch a killer if your official paperwork refuses to acknowledge the actual crime he committed.
Because the forensic evidence was essentially erased by this respectability filter, the police had absolutely nothing. No physical leads, no accurate time of death, no crime scene data.
Nothing at all.
But they still had a frantic city demanding an arrest. And that desperation creates a vacuum.
And into that vacuum, they drag a 21-year-old dishwasher named Benny Bedwell.
Tell me about Benny.
Benny Bedwell was a semi-literate drifter from Tennessee who worked at a Skid Row restaurant in Chicago. He was incredibly vulnerable, no money, no powerful family, and a very low level of education.
Perfect scapegoat.
And in a tragic coincidence, he bore a passing resemblance to Elvis Presley.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
I wish I were. The restaurant owners called the police, claiming Bedwell had been in their diner early on December 30th with 2 girls who looked like the Grimes sisters. The police arrested him immediately.
And they threw him into an interrogation room and kept him there for 3 days.
72 hours.
After 72 hours, Bedwell signs a 14-page confession. He claims he and a friend fed the girls hot dogs, took them to a series of Skid Row bars, and when the girls refused their sexual advances, they beat them, knocked them out, and dumped them in the snow.
But almost immediately after he was brought into court, Bedwell recanted the entire thing, saying he was threatened, bribed, and mentally broken by the detectives.
And to understand exactly how a police department manufactures a 14-page fiction and gets a man to sign it, we have to look closely at that 1961 academic paper by Gerhard O.W. Mueller.
Yes, the Mueller paper.
Because Mueller breaks down the actual questioning methods police used during this era, categorizing them into 4 pillars of interrogation.
Right, and the first pillar is brutality, the classic third degree, physical abuse.
Just beating a confession out of someone.
Exactly. But Mueller notes this was actually becoming less common because judges were starting to throw out confessions if a suspect showed up to court with broken ribs. So police had to evolve.
Which leads to Mueller's second pillar, which is psychological coercion.
This is the mental torment.
Yeah, sleep deprivation. Relay questioning, where teams of fresh detectives tag in and out while the suspect is kept awake for days.
Keeping a human brain awake and under extreme stress for 72 hours, like they did to Bedwell, induces a state practically indistinguishable from psychosis. You literally lose your grip on reality.
And Mueller's third pillar is perhaps the most insidious, right? Trickery and deceit.
Yes, and unlike physical beatings, this was perfectly legal. Mueller describes the use of fake emotional displays, the soft touch method where a detective pretends to be a suspect's only friend.
Or blatantly lying about evidence.
Precisely.
Let's talk about the mechanism of that deceit, because it completely warps an innocent person's survival instincts.
It really does.
When a detective sits across from an innocent 21-year-old and confidently lies, saying, "We have your fingerprints on their clothes, we have 5 witnesses, you are going to the electric chair," the suspect's brain just panics.
The risk assessment completely breaks down.
Exactly. They start thinking, if I'm already doomed, maybe if I sign this piece of paper saying it was an accident, they'll let me live. Trickery forces innocent people to negotiate their own false guilt just to survive the room.
It's terrifying. And the fourth pillar Mueller identifies is scientific means.
Like what?
This included the use of truth serum drugs or the polygraph machine.
But courts didn't really trust those back then, did they?
No, courts were highly skeptical of polygraphs and rarely allowed them as evidence because the science was so flawed, but police used them constantly.
Not to find the truth.
Right, but as a prop to terrify uneducated suspects into thinking a machine could read their minds.
Wow. And the Mueller paper explains this entirely through a stimulus response theory.
Yes, that's a key concept here.
The police prejudge a suspect. They get tunnel vision. They decided Benny Bedwell was guilty the moment he walked in.
So the interrogation wasn't a search for facts.
Not at all. It was a grueling process of applying enough psychological stimulus until they got the desired response as signature on a confession.
But the physical reality of the crime completely contradicted Bedwell's coerced confession.
Because he said he fed the girls hot dogs.
Yes. But the autopsy, before it was sanitized, showed absolutely no hot dogs in their systems. Their stomach contents perfectly matched the home-cooked meal they had eaten at Loretta's house before leaving for the theater.
And didn't he also confess to dumping the bodies on a specific date?
January 13th. But his employer provided time cards proving he was clocked in at work washing dishes at that exact hour.
So it was a total fabrication.
Completely. The charges against Bedwell were eventually dropped when it became undeniable that the timeline was physically impossible.
But this brings us to the grand, tragic paradox of this entire case, the opportunity cost of torturing Benny Bedwell.
Right, because while the police spent days breaking an innocent dishwasher, they completely ignored the monsters hiding in plain sight.
And the list of missed suspects is chilling. Let's look at Max Fleeg.
Yes, Max Fleeg. He was a 17-year-old local with a known documented history of violence against women.
Okay, so a viable suspect.
Very viable. The police actually brought him in for questioning during the initial sweep. They hooked him up to a polygraph machine.
Which, under Illinois law at the time, was entirely illegal to administer to a minor without a parent or lawyer present.
Right. But during this illegal polygraph, Fleeg actually confessed to murdering Barbara and Patricia Grimes. He admitted to it.
Wait, he confessed?
He did, but because the police violated procedural rules by giving a minor a polygraph, the confession was legally useless.
And they had no physical evidence.
Exactly. Furthermore, because they had so thoroughly bungled the crime scene forensics searching for a respectable cause of death, they had no physical evidence to tie him to the location. So they just let a confessed killer walk out the front door.
That is the ultimate aha moment of this historical nightmare. The 1950s legal system protected a suspect like Max Fleeg, allowing a confessed predator to go free because of procedural rules around his age.
Well, at the same time.
Right. That exact same system allowed detectives to hold an innocent adult like Benny Bedwell in a room for 3 days, sleep deprive him, and mentally break him until he signed a fake confession.
Yeah.
The rules meant to protect people actually shielded predators and destroyed the innocent.
And the cost of letting Fleeg go was horrific.
What happened?
A year later, Max Fleeg murdered a 14-year-old girl named Mary Lou Wagner.
Oh my God. That is sickening.
It is. And Fleeg wasn't even the only bizarre lead they dropped. There was Walter Krantz, a 53-year-old self-proclaimed psychic.
A psychic?
Yeah, before the bodies were even discovered, Krantz called the police and accurately described a location just a mile from where the girls were eventually found behind that guardrail.
Let me guess. He said it came to him in a vision.
He claimed the coordinates came to him in a dream.
I mean, people don't just guess locations within a mile radius in a metropolitan area out of thin air.
No, they don't. He either saw something or he was involved. Police interrogated him briefly, but again, lacking the hard forensic evidence they had allowed to degrade, they simply released him.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then there is the deeply disturbing case of Charles Melquist.
Melquist is a very dark chapter in all this.
Yeah. In 1958, roughly a year after the Graham sisters were found, a 15-year-old girl named Bonnie Lee Scott went missing from a Chicago suburb. Her decapitated body was discovered 2 months later, less than 10 miles from where Barbara and Patricia were found.
And Charles Melquist confessed to her murder.
Right. And investigators at the time noted striking similarities in how the bodies were disposed of, right?
Yes, the geographic proximity and the victimology were incredibly aligned.
But Charles Melquist was never even questioned for the Grimes murders.
Never.
And why? Because his defense attorney simply refused to allow it. And the police, lacking any leverage, just walked away.
The procedural loopholes struck again, creating a protective barrier around a convicted killer.
But the detail that will just stick with you, the thing that Loretta Grimes had to live with for the rest of her life, were the phone calls.
The phone calls are haunting.
In May of 1957, Loretta received an anonymous call from a man boasting about killing her daughters. He taunted her.
It's just evil.
He laughed at the police for trying to pin the crime on the Elvis lookalike, Bedwell. And to prove he was the actual killer, he gave Loretta a hyper-specific detail. He described how the toes on the smaller girl's feet were crossed.
And that was a highly specific, closely guarded detail of Patricia's anatomy. Only the family, the coroner, the lead detectives, and the killer could have possibly known that.
Fast forward to the day after Bonnie Lee Scott's body is found in 1958. Loretta's phone rings again. She picks it up, and voice says, "I've committed another perfect crime."
Oh, wow.
Loretta maintained until the day she died in 1989 that it was the exact same voice on the other end of the line. But because of legal maneuvering, Melquist was never pushed, never fully investigated for her daughter's death.
It is a heartbreaking cascade of institutional failures.
It really is.
The botched forensics, driven by a misguided desire to protect societal respectability, completely destroyed the evidentiary foundation. And the subsequent desperation for a confession, literally any confession, highlighted the absolute dark age of police interrogation, where the appearance of justice was far more important than the truth.
Joseph Grimes died in 1965. Loretta passed away in 1989. Neither parent ever saw justice for Barbara and Patricia.
That's just incredibly sad.
It is. And, you're listening to this in a modern world, a world of rapid DNA testing, ubiquitous cell phone tracking, and strict Miranda rights. It's really easy to think of 1950s Chicago as ancient history.
It feels like a different planet.
But the rules governing how the state can legally strip away a person's freedom, the dark psychology of the interrogation room, and what constitutes a truly voluntary statement, those things are constantly shifting.
They are still evolving today.
Exactly. The Grimes case serves as a stark historical warning of what happens when a justice system prioritizes closing a case over finding the actual killer.
Because when the narrative becomes more important than the evidence, everyone loses. The innocent are punished, the victims are forgotten, and the monsters remain free.
I want to leave you with a final thought today. We look back at archives full of neatly tied up, solved historical cases. But if the truth of a double murder could be so easily warped by the very people tasked with solving it, if medical professionals could sanitize an autopsy to protect a victim's reputation, and detectives could legally inflict enough psychological terror to make an innocent man sign his own death warrant just to appease the press, how many of those solved cases in our history books are actually just fictions?
That's a chilling question.
How much of our criminal history is just a collection of convenient stories agreed upon by exhausted suspects and desperate detectives? Next time you read about a closed case from the past, you might want to look a little closer at the paperwork.